hand it over to our presenters, please allow me to cover a couple housekeeping items. Time will be provided for questions and answers halfway through the webinar and again at the end of the presentation. You should see a primary presentation window on your screen as well as a selection of windows on the right-hand side. One of those windows should say Q&A. This is where you can type any questions during or at the end of the presentation. To ask a question at any time, just type it into the small white box at the bottom of the Q&A window. After typing your question, press Enter, and your question will be submitted to all presenters. Questions will appear in a queue in the order in which they are received. The presenters will respond to as many questions as possible during the Q&A periods of the webinar using the audio system so that everybody can hear the answers. If you ask a technical question about the webinar itself during the presentation, I may be able to respond to you directly by text through the same system. Today's webinar will be recorded. It will be made available on SHEEO's website sometime next week. To help us gauge the effectiveness of our webinars, we're trying to get an accurate count of our participants. If you're sharing this webinar with someone else using a single connection, would you please let us know by sending us a note in the Q&A window indicating how many additional people are joining you? Thank you. I'll now turn it over to Sharmila Mann to introduce the webinar and the rest of our presenters.
Thanks so much, Chris. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the third webinar of the NASH-SHEEO series, Advancing Educator Preparation. Today's webinar is titled UNC Teacher Principal Quality Research, Preparing More Higher Quality Teachers and School Leaders for North Carolina's Public Schools, and will be presented by two education leaders from the University of North Carolina System Office, Tom Ross and Elisa Chapman. Elisa Chapman serves as Vice President for Academic and University Programs for the University of North Carolina General Administration, where she has the responsibility of advancing efforts within the university to prepare more and better teachers and school leaders for the public schools of North Carolina. Her direct responsibilities include supporting and strengthening academic program development for undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral education programs across the university, research aimed at improving the recruitment, preparation, and development of teachers and school leaders, enhancing public service outreach programs of UNC's 15 accredited schools of education, as well as the UNC Center for School Leadership Development, and working closely with the UNC Council of Education Deans, North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, and the State Board of Education. Tom Ross has been president of the 17-campus University of North Carolina system since 2011. Prior to his tenure as president of UNC, Tom had a long and illustrious career as an academic, a lawyer, and a philanthropist. After working as an assistant professor of public law and government at UNC Chapel Hill School of Government, Tom served on the North Carolina Superior Court for 17 years, where his work included creating a model, structured sentencing system that differentiated between violent and nonviolent offenders. In 2001, after leaving the bench, he served for 7 years as executive director of the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation, awarding $20 million annually to nonprofit groups focused on community economic development, democracy and civic engagement, the environment, pre-college education, and social justice. In addition to his official positions, Tom has been active in both civic and community service, serving on the governing and advising boards of a wide variety of North Carolina and national organizations, including the Executive Committee of SHEEO. I will now turn it over to SHEEO President George Pernsteiner to say a few words about Tom Ross's long-term engagement with and contributions to our organization, the National Association of State Higher Education Executive Officers.
Thank you, Sharmila, and thanks to all of you who have joined us today. I am convinced that this will be a productive use of your time and a very helpful thing for all of us who care about educator preparation and leadership programs. As Sharmila mentioned, Tom Ross is the president of the University of North Carolina system and has been for nearly 5 years. Tom, before that, was the president of Davidson College in North Carolina. He has deep North Carolina roots, but he's also been in the leadership and the only person in the leadership of both SHEEO and NASH, which are the organizations that are presenting today's webinar. Tom understands policy. He understands universities, and as Sharmila noted, he understands the law. And for somebody who has been advised by and counseled by him for several years, I will tell you he brings all of that to bear. He brings all of it to bear in leading the university. He brings all of it to bear in what he has done for us in SHEEO and in NASH. I know that he is passionate about success for North Carolinians, which is why he has become so involved in understanding and improving North Carolina's educator preparation programs. And that's something he shared with his fellow SHEEO colleagues earlier, and I'm sure that because he is willing to share it again, we all will be very grateful. Tom, please take it away and enlighten us and inspire us.
Oh, thank you, George, and you're very generous with your comments. I appreciate them. I'm going to put you down as a reference when I'm looking for my next job. So welcome to everybody. We're excited about the opportunity to spend a little time with you this afternoon talking about teacher preparation and some of the work we're doing in North Carolina. Let me put a little context around our work, if I might, and say that the public university in North Carolina has 15 accredited schools of teacher preparation, and we produce a significant portion of the teachers that are in the classrooms of our state. So our work is important, and we recognize that we have an obligation to prepare the best teachers possible and to do all we can to ensure that they're successful and that they stay in the classroom, because as I think all of those of you who are on the line probably already know, retention of new teachers is a challenge everywhere. We certainly have that challenge in this state. But what's happened here is, for a variety of different reasons, we have seen a dramatic decrease in enrollment in both our undergraduate teacher preparation programs and our graduate programs. And, you know, that's of great concern to us because obviously if you're not getting the potential teachers enrolled in the classroom, then they're not going to be coming out of the classroom at the other end into the classroom, and that's going to lead, we're fearful, to a teacher shortage. So our board, both because of their interest in the quality of teacher preparation and the kind of work that we were doing in our schools of education and a desire to improve that work, and because of their concerns about declining enrollment, created a task force that looked at teacher preparation. It was a year-long process in which they visited a number of our schools. They brought in a number of education leaders to talk about reforms and trends around the country, and then they produced a series of recommendations after this year-long period, about 7 recommendations dealing from things like new teacher support to doing what we could to strengthen recruitment and raising standards for teachers, potential teachers that entered our education programs. So we're looking at the curriculum, a number of different areas where we can be sure that we're doing the right thing. There are 2 sort of key components to what we're doing that we want to talk about this afternoon. In the first session particularly, we want to talk about a dashboard that we've developed cooperatively with a corporate partner, SAS, that is located here in North Carolina, but is a worldwide company, the largest privately owned software company in the world. And they've been extremely helpful to us, and their CEO's wife, Ann Goodnight, chaired our board's task force and has been a real leader in education in North Carolina and has a particular interest in teacher preparation. And so she and Mr. and Ms. Goodnight's company have worked closely with us to develop this dashboard, which Elisa Chapman is going to share with you in just a few moments. In the second session this afternoon, we're going to spend some time talking about our teacher quality research, which is really the underpinning for how we are able to evaluate the success of our teacher preparation programs, understand where their weaknesses, figure out how to make adjustments in the curriculum and otherwise in those programs to be sure that we're doing everything we can to take the students that we receive and turn them into the best teachers possible. We know that there's some challenges. I mean, every school of education is asked to produce the best teachers possible, but a lot depends on who comes into the program and how prepared they are when they get there. So that's one of the reasons we're looking at ways to expand our efforts to recruit and strengthen the pool of people that come into our schools. But we also know that, even with the best classroom education, enhanced clinical opportunities are important. And so we're part of the recommendations of our task force is to continue to look at clinical opportunities and expanding those to be sure that we are doing all we can to give real classroom, real life experience to our students before they are employed. And then finally, we've invested significant resources. This is a place where Elisa has really led the charge in developing a new teacher support program in North Carolina, which is a mentoring program and provides coaching to teachers and programming to help them enter their profession successfully, but also stay with them during those early first 3 years of teaching in order to try to enhance retention. Because if we can improve retention and improve the quality of the teachers that we're coming out of the classroom, then we hope we can overcome this drop in enrollment. So there's a lot going on here. I think we're doing some good work. We have a lot to learn, and I'm sure that we'll be enlightened this afternoon from questions that we hear from the participants, and we appreciate each of you taking some time to be a part of this afternoon, and look forward to the presentations and also to the questions that may come as a result. So again, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this, George, and everyone. And I'm going to ask Elisa now if she would to share with you the dashboard that was developed along with SAS. I think the last thing I'd say about this is that this dashboard is a direct result of one of our task force recommendation, which is to enhance public accountability of just how our teacher education programs are working, because we think if we're doing a good job for the most part, but we want the public to know exactly what we're doing, good or bad, because that helps us be able to explain to people where our strengths are, but also where we need to improve, and sometimes what is needed to help us improve. So we think being accountable and transparent is helpful, and so that's the reason for our wanting to develop the dashboard, which again would not have been possible without the cooperation and assistance of SAS, which has been a great corporate partner for us. So let me turn it over to Elisa Chapman, and she can introduce Maddie Rivers as well from SAS, and I think they'll have some really interesting and exciting things to talk to you about. So thanks for your attention.
Okay, well, thanks to President Ross for those kind introductory remarks. What we'd like to do now is provide you with a demonstration of the Educator Quality Dashboard. We have a few preceding slides before we lead into the actual live demonstration in the SAS Visual Analytics software tool. Let me just acknowledge a couple of individuals that are on the phone and are going to help me with this demonstration and presentation of this segment of the webinar. Jeff Garland with SAS Institute, he's not on the webinar with us today, but he's been instrumental in helping to lead the project effort. Dr. Tiffany Watts with the UNC Center for School Leadership Development. She's a part of the UNC General Administration team that has been leading the effort to develop the dashboard, as well as Maddie Rivers with the SAS Institute, who is the lead developer in doing the work to pull together this dashboard. Tiffany and Maddie are going to chime in on a few of the slides as we work through them today. So the core project team for the dashboard development was myself, another colleague, Dan Cohen-Vogel, who is our Director of Institutional Research for the University of North Carolina, as well as Tiffany Watts. And on the SAS side, Jeff Garland, Maddie Rivers, and another programmer, Selma Osborne, has also been a key developer in the dashboard efforts. What we'd like to share with you today is just a very brief, a few comments on the project update, and then we'll launch into the demonstration of the dashboard and a presentation of the data that we currently have in the dashboard. We're going to touch on about 8 or 9 indicators or outcomes that we have identified for our initial launch of the dashboard. They're listed on the slide that you see in front of you. We'll show you some data on education enrollment trends that the President referenced in his opening comments, data on teacher productivity of new initially licensed teachers in North Carolina, the distribution of employed graduates from our UNC institutions across the state. We have some interesting profile comparison data of education graduates versus other graduates on our campuses. Data from one of our research analyses that we have conducted, our teacher portals analysis. We also have on the line Dr. Kevin Bastian, who is one of our lead researchers in conducting this research. And he'll be a part of our comments in the second segment of today's webinar. We have teacher preparation program effectiveness data, teacher retention data, and data on our university school teacher education partnerships. So, information on the project overview. Maddie, do you want to tee us up here?
Sure, I can. So staff wants to work with the UNC system to help them produce this teacher dashboard that we've been describing. And as both Elisa and President Ross have kind of hit on previously, they want this to be very transparent. So we want to give users a way to visually interpret some of the data that the system office is generating and receiving about educator preparation and effectiveness. Right now, this data is focused on North Carolina. There is some data about out-of-state teachers coming in and working within the state, and I believe as the dashboard grows, there's going to be a lot of potential to expand that initial scope.
Thank you, Maddie. Tiffany, do you want to provide us an overview of the timeline here?
Sure. So we first began our initial meeting to discuss the dashboard project with SAS in August of 2014. The project then kicked off in September. We've had ongoing weekly meetings with SAS's team as well as our team at UNC to discuss the ongoing development and the different data indicators. In January, this dashboard was demoed for several education leaders across the state during a meeting of our UNC Board of Governors. It was an education summit. And our target go-live date for the dashboard is in May of this year.
Great, thank you. So this next slide provides you with the current design and layout of the dashboard website. What you'll see today are the data and indicators in the visual analytics tool. When we go live in May, the site will have this wraparound look and feel. We think that, or we know that the organization and navigation of the information and data in the dashboard is very important. So it will take on this look and feel, and you see the key areas for launching into aspects of the dashboard are recruitment and selection, preparation, performance and employment, and partnerships. And so from those areas of the main dashboard website, you would be able to pull up the key indicators that we'll look at in the visual analytics tool today. So now let's transition into the visual analytics software and take a look at some of the data in the dashboard. I think that either Chris or Sharmila did reference in their opening comments, we will have time for Q&A after the demonstration of the dashboard. So as Maddie sets this up for us, I'm going to ask her if there are any general comments that she would like to make about navigation of the visual analytics software. Not sure, I'm not hearing any audio come through.
I apologize.
That's okay.
So visual analytics is designed to be a very point-and-click, user-friendly piece of software. And with that, we like to give the users the ability to kind of slice data in ways that may be more interesting to them, whether it's to filter down by a particular campus or to look within a certain number of years or a certain type of program level. So just give the user the ability to drill down to different levels of information and also slice and dice information in ways that are most interesting to them.
Okay, great. Thank you, Maddie. I'm not certain if you can pull the screen up just a little bit larger in the screen share view. I'll let you work on that. The information that she's pulling up right now is enrollment trend data. This is information that President Ross referenced just a few minutes ago. And here we have 5-year trend data on education enrollments from all UNC campuses. The top panel, the bar graph, breaks out undergraduate and graduate level enrollment data. And you see that the green colored bar is for undergraduate programs, and the yellow colored bar is for graduate programs. The panel on the bottom of the dashboard view is a line graph of the combined enrollments, undergraduate and graduate, for all campuses. These are education enrollments in the UNC system, and obviously this is a very concerning trend line for us. From the fall head count of 2013 to the fall head count of 2014, our education enrollments at the graduate and undergraduate level have declined by 12%. And since 2010, our enrollments have declined by a startling 27%. So we're taking a number of strategic actions that are identified in the recommendations that President Ross referenced that came from our UNC Board of Governors in January to turn the tide of those declining enrollments. But obviously the visual analytics tool here is a great tool to look at the information and understand it in important ways. So you'll see across the top of the screen there is a UNC System Total tab, and that's what we're looking at now. Maddie's running her cursor across all of the campuses in the UNC system that prepare teachers. We have 15 institutions that prepare teachers across the UNC system. Maddie, if we could, let's take a look at Appalachian State University as an example, and you'll see the data change in the dashboard view, and here we have the undergraduate and graduate enrollments for ASU in the top panel, and the trend line graph of enrollments for ASU. They were relatively flat from 2012 to 13 with steeper declines in 2013 to 2014, and you see that referenced in the line graph there. Maddie, I'd like to now move to teacher productivity. You could pull up that dashboard view. And here you'll see 3 panels of information in the dashboard. The top left is a line graph view of new initially licensed teachers that our UNC institutions produced over a 5-year period of time. And you'll notice the steep increase. Our prior strategic planning efforts that we put in place yielded very positive returns for our state and for the university. And you see the more recent declines in enrollment that were shown when we looked at the enrollment trend data that pop up in the line graph. So we're looking at data in this particular view. Again, I would remind the audience that we have not gone live with our dashboard, so you're looking at not a finished product. So we're working really hard to complete a number of elements, data elements, as well as look and feel and visual aesthetics of the dashboard view. We're giving you a sneak preview of the dashboard before it's completed and ready to go live. So again, the data that you're looking at are from 2006-07 through 2010-11. In the top right section of the screen, you see a tree map of the same data. It's just displayed in a different way. So this infographic offers a good sense of the size and proportion of institutional productivity. And the color variance also gives you a sense of the size of at least the number of teachers that particular institutions are producing. So Maddie, if you would, let's look at UNC Asheville. And when she mouses over that part of the tree map, some additional demographic information comes up, and it shows the percentage of newly licensed teachers that they contribute to the whole for the UNC system, and then the actual number of teachers. UNC Asheville is a small liberal arts institution. They prepare predominantly what we would call licensure-only newly licensed teachers. In fact, they don't have education degrees at UNC Asheville, but they produce new teachers for our state. And they're very much an important and critical local supplier of teachers for Buncombe County schools. Maddie, let's show a contrast to UNC Asheville and take a look at East Carolina University on the left side of the tree map. And you'll see that the demographic information comes up for East Carolina University. They're they're beyond a local and even regional supplier of teachers for the state. They're a statewide provider of teachers, along with a number of other institutions that you can see in the tree map. But you see what the proportion and actual numbers of new initially licensed teachers are that they contribute to our overall supply of teachers in the state. I'd also like to mention that the table in the dashboard panel, the lower part of the dashboard view, provides detailed information about the graphs up above. I would also mention that the tree map has the capability to drill in, and you can pull this up in a much larger view. We won't show all of the features of the visual analytics tool and the capabilities of this dashboard today, but we'll try to reference and show you as many as possible. Maddie, if we could now move to the profile comparison information. So in this particular report within the dashboard, we have compared a number of academic indicators comparing education graduates to non-education graduates within the UNC system. There are a couple of panels of information, and up at the very top of this dashboard view, you'll notice a kind of a toggle of you can look at high school GPA, you can look at the four-year GPA at the end of the four-year degree, the culminating GPA, or you could look at SAT average information. Let's first take a look, Maddie, at high school GPA, if we could. So in the bar graph that you see in the top panel, you see education versus non-education. Education is the green colored bar, and non-education is the yellow colored bar. And this is the high school GPA of education graduates versus the high school GPA of non-education graduates. In most of these comparisons, the high school GPA is greater for education graduates than for the non-education graduates. Detailed information is in the table in the bottom panel of this dashboard view. The next item we'll look at in this report, Maddie, is the SAT average. So here you have the same comparison groups, education versus non-education. And you'll see in many to most instances, the SAT average is the same, if not slightly higher for education graduates. There are some institutions where the SAT average is slightly higher for the non-education comparison group. And again, the table in the panel of the dashboard, the lower part of the dashboard, provides you with the detailed information. And then lastly, Maddie, let's take a look at the GPA at the end of a 4-year degree. And so this would be the culminating GPA of education versus non-education graduates. And again, the green bar is education graduates, the yellow bar non-education graduates, and you'll see that the higher value on almost all of our campuses is for the education graduates. Maddie, let's move on to another report within the dashboard and take a look at the distribution of employed graduates across the state. The data that is coming up in this particular dashboard view is for the 2010-11 year. The institutions you'll see, just as in most of the other views within the dashboard, are listed across the top panel of the dashboard view. And the map, you'll see a color gradient that shows the concentration of employed graduates by school district in North Carolina, which is almost synonymous with the counties. We have 115 local education agencies in North Carolina. I think it's 115, and we have 100 counties within our state. What we're able to do here is select by institution to see where the graduates of individual institutions are employed, at least from this particular year. And we certainly, again, you're not looking at a finished product. We have additional data that we'll be adding to the dashboard when we go live. We'll be able to, in time, search over years and see how the distribution may change over a period of time. Maddie, let's look at UNC Asheville as an example. We referenced them in an earlier dashboard view. They're a much smaller liberal arts institution, a smaller producer of teachers, but a very important producer of teachers for Buncombe County schools. And you'll see that Buncombe County is highlighted on the state map here. And when Maddie mouses over Buncombe County, some additional information comes up. Currently, there's 190 some employed teachers in Buncombe County schools that were prepared by UNC Asheville. And just below Buncombe County, Maddie, we'll see we have Henderson County, and again, 41 teachers prepared by UNC Asheville are employed in Henderson County schools. Okay, let's take a look at Fayetteville State University. They're more in the eastern part of our state. And Fayetteville State University is an important local and regional supplier of teachers for North Carolina. Fayetteville State University is located in Cumberland County, and you see on the map where they're a critical supplier of teachers for Cumberland County schools, 530 or so employed, at least in this particular 2010-11 school year. And then you can see the variance of shade around Cumberland County. Robinson County Schools, 43 teachers prepared by FSU. Sampson County Schools, 74%. We are still working on, in the visual aesthetics of the dashboard, the color gradients. I'm not sure we've quite perfected it. So hopefully we'll be able to show a little bit more of a differentiation across the shades within this particular view of the map. Let's take a look now at Appalachian State University. ASU is a very large producer of teachers in North Carolina. They're a statewide producer of teachers, and you certainly see the color gradient across the map here. Maddie, can you find Watauga County on the western part of the state here? Okay, and you'll see that 190 of the teachers in Watauga County were prepared by Appalachian State University, and you certainly see how their reach goes all the way to the Piedmont part of our state, and Wake County is bolded, and if we mouse over that, you'll see 314 of the teachers employed in Wake County were prepared by ASU. And then lastly, we'll just pull up very briefly UNC Wilmington. UNC Wilmington's on the eastern part of our state, and you'll notice that they are a relatively large producer of teachers. They go far beyond a local or regional reach. They're located in New Hanover County, and Maddie, if you could find New Hanover County there. They've prepared 400 or 750 or so of the teachers in New Hanover County for this particular school year. But you also see where in Wake County, where our capital is located, they've prepared significant number of teachers in Wake County as well, 200 or so. Great. Okay, Maddie, let's move into the next report within the dashboard that we'd like to share today. And we have a couple of reports or views to show. This is some of the portals research that we're going to present to you a little later in the webinar. A number of the analyses that we've completed as a part of our research efforts will become outcomes and indicators within the dashboard. So this is what we call our portals analysis, and we've been able to do some really interesting things within the visual analytics tool in how to present this information. Here, what we have the ability to do is take a look at a couple of cuts of the data. In the top left-hand side of the screen, we have the ability to sort this data by all teachers employed in the state, or we can look at teachers with 5 or less years of experience. And for the purposes of our demonstration today, we're going to look at all teachers. Below that particular part of the dashboard, you have the ability to select school districts across the state to pull up in specific information from the portal's analysis about those districts. So, Maddie, if you would, let's look at Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. They are one of the largest school districts in North Carolina, located obviously in Charlotte, North Carolina. And when Maddie selects Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, what you see in the pie chart is data from our portals analysis. And so here we have identified 12 actual pathways or routes of preparation that teachers have come through prior to teaching in our public schools. And what the pie chart depicts is the proportion of those routes of those teachers that have been prepared by those varying routes. So for Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, close to half of the teachers in their school district were prepared out of state. 47% of the teachers in that particular school district were prepared out of state. The University of North Carolina prepared just over 22% of the teachers employed in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. Again, we're looking at data for the 2011-12 school year. Well, in future years, and as we go live, we'll have multiple years of data that we can pull up this information and view in. You'll also see that alternative entry teachers represent about 15% of the workforce in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. They have a small portion of Teach for America core members, close to 3% of the workforce in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools were our TFA core members. We also have a number of teachers employed in Charlotte that were prepared by private and independent institutions in North Carolina. I think that's about 6%. And then we have a program in North Carolina that supplies teachers to our public schools called the Visiting International Faculty Program. So VIF represents about 1% or so of the teachers in Charlotte MEC. We also have a category here called unclassifiable. We didn't have enough information in our research to categorize these teachers in any of the other portals. And later on in our presentation this afternoon, where we maybe take a little bit deeper dive in the portals analysis, our researcher Kevin Bastian may want to say a word or two about that. The other thing that I'll reference on this particular view is the table below provides detailed information about the actual numbers and percents of teachers within the county. Now, Maddie, this is where my notes kind of drop off a little bit because we've added a few things just within the last couple of days. So we have a couple of views of the portals data that we want to show you. The next report allows us to show school level information. So while we were just looking at district level information, we also have the ability to drill down to and look at data on individual schools within a district. And that information is coming up right now. So for reference, let's stick with Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, Maddie. If you could pull up CMS schools, and we'll get that pie chart on the screen. And we also have the ability to look at individual schools within the Charlotte-Mecklenburg School District. And I think we're looking at right now one of their elementary schools. This particular elementary school has over 50% of the teachers prepared out of state. They have close to 4% TFA core members, 10%, close to 10% private and independent, prepared by private and independent institutions in North Carolina, 10% alternative entry, and about 20% prepared by the UNC system. Pull up another school, Maddie. Is this the map where you can do comparisons of different schools?
Yes, we can do that here.
Okay. Okay, so now she's pulled up another school within Charlotte-Mecklenburg, and you can see the difference of proportion of teachers in the two schools. The third tab on portals, Maddie, allows you to do comparison of districts and schools. Is that correct?
That is correct. Up at the top, you'll be able to compare districts to each other if you'd like to compare multiple districts, or you could select a single district and then select a school or multiple schools from that district and see how all of the pie charts compare to each other.
So we're looking at Alamance.
So I just changed it now so that we can stick with Charlotte-Mecklenburg.
Okay.
And here are a couple different elementary schools. The schools look pretty similar. Maybe we'll try something else. This one's a little bit different.
Yeah. It's a little bit hard to see on my screen view. Again, so just as a summary, what we'll be able to do is pull up the district breakout in the top view and then individual schools. And you can also compare across districts and schools within districts as well, I believe, in this particular map.
Yeah.
Okay, the next report that we want to pull up is our teacher preparation program effectiveness data. And this is a value add analysis that we do on UNC teacher education programs. And as this comes up, I'll direct your attention to the left side of the screen, and you'll notice where we have this data available at the elementary, middle, and high school level, and then for each of those levels, the section of the table below that shows you the tested subject areas. And so what we're looking at here in the dashboard view is for elementary prepared teachers and mathematics. Those are the radio buttons that are highlighted. The screen view, the bar chart, essentially, I'll direct your attention to the 0% line. That's the average of all teachers in North Carolina. And the bars that you see to the right are above average. And the bars that you see to the left are below the average. The bars that are highlighted in yellow are significant and positive. And of course, if they were highlighted yellow to the left of the 0%, would be significant and negative. So we have two institutions that our data from this analysis show they're doing a really good job in terms of preparing elementary school math teachers. We have, I'll make note of the very top institution that's not significant and positive, the top green bar. North Carolina State University has a relatively young, recently approved elementary preparation program. And so there aren't enough graduates in the field employed from their degree program to have significance. But directionally, it's interesting data to look at. And as they graduate more from their program and they become employed, this very well could turn significant, and we'll be looking to see what the best promising practices are that they've employed within their preparation program there. So in this particular dashboard report, we do have the ability, we won't take the time right now to go into the middle and high school level or any of those tested subject areas, but you can see from the radio buttons on the left side of the screen, you would be able to pull up that detailed information on the institutions. The last report that we'll pull up before we allow time for some Q&A is our University School Teacher Education Partnership data. We call these in North Carolina our U-Steps. So every school district in North Carolina is a part of one or more formal partnerships with a UNC institution, and this map or this dashboard view that we're working on helps to identify where they are across the state. So Maddie, let's pull up East Carolina University. And what you'll see highlighted are the school districts that ECU's College of Education has a formal partnership with. And the table to the right identifies the school district. And Maddie could click on any institution and it would pull up additional information about the districts that particular institution partners with. You can also look at all institutions. Maddie, if you can go back to the full view of the state with no institution selected, and mouse over any particular school district like Wake County. And if you clicked on Wake County, Maddie, does it pull up in the table on the right? It tells you what institutions that Wake County Schools is working with. And we do want to append in the future the dashboard with additional information about the kinds of activities and work that are going on in the school districts where our institutions have partnerships. So I think, Maddie or Tiffany, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that covers all of the elements of the dashboard that we wanted to touch on before we allow time for Q&A. Am I correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, so Sharmila, at this point in time, we would be glad to take questions from the audience on anything that we've presented in segment 1 of the webinar.
So thanks, Elisa, and Maddie and Tiffany. Maddie, if you would be able to shrink that down again, thank you so much. So we don't have any questions queued up right now, but we would love to get your questions and respond to them. And Elisa, I believe there was something that you wanted to talk about just briefly while we were waiting for some questions to queue up.
So we've identified for our go live date 13 outcomes or performance indicators that will be our initial set of indicators for our go live date. We've shown many of them to you today, but there are a number that we're not ready to demonstrate yet. We'll certainly have information on the selection criteria into our teacher preparation programs by institution and by academic program. We'll have information on our licensure exam results. We'll have data on student teaching and clinical experience. We have time to degree information, data that we'll develop in the dashboard. Very interestingly, we have job placement rate data by institution and by licensure area that will be available in the dashboard when we go live, in addition to results of our recent graduate survey that we conduct to our graduates every year.
So it looks like we have our first question, and the question is, for the distribution of employed graduates, can you explain what the teacher count, university percentage, and district percentages mean?
So can you repeat that question? I was moving from one thing to the other.
Oh, no problem. So our question is, for the distribution of employed graduates, so I think that's the map you're on now, can you explain what the teacher count, university percentage, and district percentages mean?
Right.
So the 3 different categories you have there in that table below,
right.
They're just asking
right.
for a little more clarification.
Right. So the screen is pretty small for me in the view that I'm looking at, but the teacher count is, if you'll notice, Maddie can scroll down in that table, and essentially that lists all of the school districts in North Carolina. The teacher count column tells you precisely how many teachers are employed in that particular county by the institution that's selected. And I think in this particular example, it's UNC Wilmington, and you can see what the actual count is. The percentage tells you the percentage of teachers that represents of all teachers employed in that particular county.
How about the district percentage?
The district percentage.
So sorry, I'll chime in, Elisa, if you'd like me to.
Right.
The district percentage would be the percentage of the district's teachers that came from that particular UNC institution, and the university percentage would simply be the percentage of teachers from that particular institution. That's the percentage of their graduates in the state. So in this case, slightly less than 1% of Wilmington's graduates were working in Alamance, Burlington schools.
Thanks so much. That's very helpful. All right. So our next question is about CAPE accreditation and whether this data will be helpful for the CAPE accreditation work of your institutions, and how easy it will be for institutions to use this information for their CAPE accreditation work.
So absolutely. In fact, many to most of the indicators that we've identified for our go live date in the dashboard really come from CAPE accreditation. And we've vetted that list of outcomes and indicators with our full Council of Education Deans, and it's my belief, and I think the Council of Education Deans in North Carolina's belief, that it will be very helpful to them. One thing that we will share with you in the next segment is a data share initiative that we're launching here. And so our institutions will have some of this detailed information about graduates from their institutions that they can use for accreditation purposes and other research and program improvement purposes as well.
Excellent. So our next question is about the university-school partnerships in North Carolina. And the question is, are university-school partnerships mandated by the state of North Carolina?
So they are not mandated, though they have been strongly encouraged from the UNC General Administration's systems perspective, even preceding my employment here within the university. We do have, as a part of those recommendations that President Ross referenced in his comments earlier, two of the recommendations actually reference partnerships. One has to do with interinstitutional and within-institution partnerships between education and arts and sciences. The other recommendation deals with partnerships between our colleges of education and the public schools that we serve and work with. And so we are thinking more deeply about what the right strategies will be to expand and enhance our partnership work. Currently, partnerships are not required, they're strongly encouraged. However, we do have a recommendation from the UNC Board of Governors that singles this out as a very important work that we need to expand and enhance.
Excellent, thank you. So our next two questions, I think, lead nicely into the second section of the webinar, and if you are planning to answer them during the research portion, we can just move into that portion of the webinar. But the questions are, how do you intend to use these data for policy and decision-making regarding teacher preparation and evaluation in your state? And then more specific question, which is considering how large the percentage of non-North Carolina prepared teachers are in your state. So when we were looking at that dashboard that was showing that more than half of the teachers in some of those districts were prepared out of state, have you investigated why that trend is as it is and how such candidates perform as compared to those prepared within the state?
Okay, so I'll address the second question first, and then I'll ask Kevin if he would like to make a few comments about the data, and I'll add to his comments and how we're using it to improve programs and policy within the state. So while the data that you were looking at in the dashboard view and the portals analysis are of employed teachers in the state, when we look at the teachers coming out of the pipeline as new initially licensed teachers, the University of North Carolina is the single largest producer of teachers for North Carolina. And we have, as a part of our portals analysis, aggregate data, impact data, value add data on those portals that you saw in the dashboard. And as a public university system in the state, when we see results that show some of those portals don't have the outcomes or results that in aggregate that we would hope for, it's obviously the data help us to think more deeply about strategies and work that we need to be doing within the state to offset the dependency of routes of preparation where we can see a greater value in other routes of preparation. So those are conversations that this data prompts and helps us think about in coming up with next steps and strategies and using the data to improve teaching quality in North Carolina. Kevin, do you want to make any comments about how we're using the data to inform policy?
Yeah, I mean, I think all I would say now is sort of maybe a preview for a little bit later. Much of what we've done now for our work, research work with the UNC system and teacher preparation, has been more focused on measures that you might consider accountability measures, rather than perhaps measures that can be used very explicitly for program improvement. And so while that's still a major focus for us, I think that those focuses on accountability and some of the aggregate data that you're seeing here in this dashboard, I do think that we're also moving towards, as I'll talk about with data sharing, really trying to focus on ways to make this research program improvement centric as well.
Excellent.
And
So, I'm sorry, go ahead, Elisa.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think we've come to the end of the time for the first set of questions, so I would welcome you to continue with the second part of your presentation.
Okay, well, thank you for those questions. And I think what we would like to do next is just offer a few thoughts and comments about what's going on in Washington and how that relates to what we're doing in North Carolina and what other states are doing. And as most of you, I'm sure, know, the Department of Education has proposed regulations to implement requirements for teacher preparation program accountability. They want to define and develop a system of accountability for teacher preparation programs at the federal level under the Higher Education Act. And you know, there are certainly some strengths to that approach. I mean, I think we certainly, as I hope you would see from the dashboard and from the research that we're doing, we're not afraid of accountability. We believe in it. We think transparency and accountability are important. By the same token, I think whenever something of this magnitude is undertaken, it often has consequences that are unforeseen and can be problematic. And so, you know, I think we share the view that SHEEO has expressed, which is if we're going to do this, we need to do it only with significant involvement from the states, as well as doing it in a realistic timeline. And I think that's one of the concerns, is that the timeline proposed is really short. And the other thing I think that we have to remember is that states are doing a lot of really important work right now. You know, North Carolina, I would like to count in that group. That would be up to others to judge, but I think from my perspective, we're doing good work, and I think other states are as well. And we can all learn from each other, and sometimes more effectively than might be from something that's dictated in Washington. And further, I think that, you know, states are different and their needs are different. And, you know, some states have declining population and declining enrollment. Other states like North Carolina continue to grow at a very fast pace. And so the question about why such a large percentage of our teachers are prepared out of state, part of the answer is we have an in-migration of students at a high level, and so we need more teachers. The demand here is higher than in many states. But further, teachers who may be prepared in a state where the need for teachers is on the decline because of enrollment drops and declining population, they're looking for a place to go to teach, and so we need teachers, and the market works in a way that they end up here. So, you know, I think states are in different positions, and because of that, their needs are different, and their approaches are going to be somewhat different to how to be the most transparent and accountable for teacher preparation. So, you know, I think where we come out on this is that we're very supportive of the overarching goal of being sure that we're preparing teachers effectively, and that our education preparation programs are strong and effective. And I think we are also believers that we've got a lot to learn and that we can do better, and that by being held accountable, it will make us stronger and more effective faster, perhaps. But I think as I say, I think there are some concerns that we have about the timeline and the speed of the federal accountability system. And I think mostly are interested in being sure that state perspectives are heard. And if we do end up with some sort of national system, in addition to our programs already needing to be accredited, and in addition to the new CAPE standards, which we certainly are aligning ourselves with, and I think many others are as well, which will help, I think, strengthen educator preparation. So we're interested in the goal, and we're concerned about the timeline, and I think we are eager to be sure that the good work of the states is not lost in the mix, and that instead that we figure out a way to take into account what's happening at the state level, and to either allow the marketplace to carry on and let us share information and make programs better in that way, or if there's going to be a federal system, that it be done only after significant state input. So I don't know if George is still on the line or not, but Sarmila may be, and I know she knows more about this than I do, and may have further comments that she would like to make. But that's just a little bit, at least, of my perspective. I don't speak for SHEEO in this regard, nor do I speak for anyone else, but I'm just sharing some of my thoughts about it. But it does bear upon the work we're doing, because what the federal government is proposing, what they're trying to accomplish, is, at least in theory, what we're already doing, and that is to develop a system of outcome-based, result-oriented research that helps inform how you prepare teachers, and that you build a loop, a feedback loop, if you will, between what's happening in the classroom with teachers, how successful are they, and going back and look at where they were prepared, and what we can do to improve their preparation if they have weaknesses in particular areas. And so that's why I think our research is so critically important, and we want to have a chance to get into that in just a few moments. But I want to pause and see if I think Elisa may have a few comments she wants to make about the overlap in our work and what's going on at the federal level, and then if others have comments or questions on this piece, perhaps we can deal with those now and then move to a closer look at what we're doing with our teacher quality research.
Tom, this is George. I think what you said was exactly right. Many of the states, or at least some of the states, including North Carolina, have really taken important steps that we, in our letter to the department, suggested the department does not want to undo with something that's untried. And so I really think the approach that you have taken and that some of the other states are taking will prove to be the path that we hope the feds will adopt, as opposed to just implementing the rules as they had proposed them.
Okay, so I'll just touch on of the measures of accountability referenced in the proposed regulations. There are a number of outcomes that we've already even shared with you today that we're producing as a part of our research efforts. Student learning outcomes, we complete a program effectiveness analysis on our schools of education and calculate value add for UNC teacher education programs. In terms of employment outcomes, we produce retention data at 3- and 5-year benchmarks for UNC teacher preparation programs. We are able to even break that out by the particular pathway that they came through the preparation program, as well as retention rates for routes of preparation in North Carolina that are not the University of North Carolina, some of those other portals or pathways. So alternative entry, private and independent institutions in our state, Teach for America out of state, etc. We have survey outcome data. We conduct a recent graduate survey for UNC institutions each year as a part of our research agenda. This year we're actually working with the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction to include private and independent institutions in our survey process. And we've been asked by the State Board of Education, and we're talking about the development of an employer survey that we would do in collaboration with the State Board of Education. And then, of course, the point about professional accreditation. All UNC institutions, our schools of education, by policy of the UNC Board of Governors, must be nationally accredited. So our colleges of education are very much a part of that process. So with that, I'll let the President make a few comments about our teacher quality research efforts, and then Dr. Kevin Bastian and I will present some information to you.
Okay, thank you, Elisa. I didn't know whether anyone else had comments or questions about the Title II proposed regulations. I'll just say I think as I mentioned, I think we have some concerns about them. We think the goal is the right goal, but we have some concerns. What I don't think we're planning to do today is to get into a lot of details about what's included in the federal proposals. There's been a comment period, and there have been a lot of comments that have been submitted. Some of the most significant around the timeline and the need for some flexibility and the need for involvement by the states in designing whatever system of accountability might come out the other end. So unless there are other comments, I'll move on, but let me pause and see if there are any. Okay, well, hearing none, let me take a moment then just to transition us to our teacher quality research. And let me say that this has been going on for a number of years now. This actually predates my time at the university, so I take no credit. Actually, I do. I take all the credit, but I don't deserve any of the credit. But this is an incredibly important research agenda for our university, and it has, it started in our efforts to be able to help the state understand what the demand for teachers was going to be in particular areas, and to be able to help our own institutions figure out what we needed to do in terms of production of teachers, so that we could be sure we were meeting the demand. So that was how some of the research got started. We became increasingly interested in outcomes-based research and really what is the value add of the teacher in the classroom, and then how does that relate back to what we're doing in the classroom in preparation of our educators. And we've been very fortunate to have some great minds working on this research. Alicia Chapman, to begin with, as I mentioned, deserves a lot of the credit for this, but Kevin Bastian and Gary Henry have been two of the researchers. I know Kevin's on the line. I think Gary may have joined us as well. And they are the experts for sure, and have taken this task on and stuck with it. And it's really incredible, all the different kinds of data that we're collecting and what it can teach us and how we can use it in our decision making at the campus level, but also at the system level. And so instead of listening to me talk, I'm going to turn it over to Elisa and ask her to bring in Kevin and lead a discussion about what we're doing in the area of teacher quality research.
Okay, thank you. So let me see if I can gain control of the slides here. So we have an overall goal within the University of North Carolina to prepare more higher quality teachers and school leaders for our public schools. There are 4 key strategies that we have focused on to address that goal: recruitment, preparation, support for beginning teachers, and of course our research efforts that looking at outcomes and impact data, and how that information can help inform our practice and the work that we do in our state. Here you're looking at information on the number of employed teachers. The data are from the 2011-12 school year. You'll see that North Carolina at that point in time had about 95,500 employed teachers. And you see the breakout by portal of those teachers. This will be familiar to you after looking at the dashboard demonstration. You see the UNC system prepares the blue bar up at the top, the single largest supplier of teachers for our state. We've broken this data out into what we call policy relevant portals. However, in our full analysis, we actually identified 12 portals of entry. Those 35,000 teachers that you see that the UNC system prepares represents about 36% of the employed workforce of teachers in our state. Next is out-of-state prepared teachers. They represent about 30,000 teachers, and alternative entry represents about 15,000 teachers. Teach for America Core members represent 0.5% of the teaching workforce in North Carolina. So this next slide is just a different way to look at North Carolina teacher supply sources over time. And here you see over this 7-year period from 2004-05 through 2011-12 how the percentages of North Carolina's employed teachers by portal change. UNC prepared teachers have increased in the last 3 to 4 years, and out-of-state prepared teachers have declined slightly. Alternative entries have been fairly flat with a recent decline. And of course, visiting international faculty program and Teach for America Core members are a small portion of our workforce and very flat over that period of time represented in this graph. So looking at the North Carolina employed teachers, here you see basically the breakout. 63% of the teachers in our state are prepared by sources other than the University of North Carolina. We prepare about 36% of the teachers. Characteristics of the teachers that the UNC system have prepared are listed in the shaded table to the right on this slide. Just over 63% of the teachers we prepare, or I'm sorry, just 83% are female, 15% are minority, and the average teaching experience is 12 years of experience. 56% of the teachers teach in elementary schools, 18% in middle grades, and 26% at the high school level. So I'm going to share with you some information on our portals analysis. I will pause and see if Kevin has anything he'd like to add, but I want to make this one point. In this particular analysis, approximately 35% of the teachers in North Carolina have value-add scores. We're beginning to use data on teacher evaluation data to mix into our analysis so we capture a larger percentage of teachers employed in the state. So in this particular analysis that's been referenced throughout our webinar today, we set out to answer 3 primary questions here. How does the performance of teachers prepared by the UNC system compare to the performance of teachers who enter North Carolina classrooms with other types of preparation? For example, out-of-state, alternative entry, Teach for America. For the report, we analyzed close to 3 million test scores, close to 1.5 million students, and over 28,000 teachers with less than 5 years of experience from all school districts in North Carolina. And I say we, it's really been Kevin Bastian's leadership and the research team that he helps lead for us, produced value-added effects have been estimated using multi-level models with 23 student, 9 classroom and teacher, and 12 school variables. Let me pause and see if Kevin has any comments that he would like to make before I move on.
No, I think you're in good shape, Elisa. Thank you, though.
Sure, thank you. Okay, so we have 2 slides on the results of this particular analysis we'll share. Here you see a summary chart of the value-add findings from the analysis. The comparison or reference group is UNC prepared teachers across all institutions. The first column represents the portals. The second column identifies the number of comparisons where teachers were less effective than UNC prepared teachers. And the third column identifies the number of comparisons where teachers were more effective than UNC prepared teachers. And the fourth column identifies the number of comparisons where teachers were no different than UNC prepared teachers. So for example, if you look at the Visiting International Faculty Program, teachers are less effective in one of our comparisons to UNC prepared teachers, and they're more effective in 2 comparisons and no different in 6. The next slide, we can take a look at this information in a little bit more detail. We can look by grade level, elementary, middle, and high. The left side of the table is where this information is sorted, and by subject, which is represented in the first column. So for example, in elementary school reading, there were no groups less effective than UNC prepared teachers, the reference group. However, visiting international faculty prepared teachers are more effective than UNC prepared teachers in elementary school reading. In middle school reading, only Teach for America teachers are more effective than UNC prepared teachers. And in high school English, no group or portal is more or less effective than UNC prepared teachers. In high school mathematics, out-of-state, visiting international faculty, and alternative entry teachers perform worse than UNC prepared teachers, and Teach for America core members perform better. It gives you a sense of how to read that particular table.
And the only, sorry Lisa, the only thing I would add about that actually, about these analyses I suppose, is we presented counts, if you will, of where instances were of a group or a portal were more or less effective than UNC system prepared teachers. But we also, when we present this and when we think about it, we make a point to make sure that the audience know that we're also interested about the size of these groups. So for instance, the groups that outperform UNC system prepared teachers, looking at the slide now, is really relegated to exclusively Teach for America and visiting international faculty, whereas the groups that the UNC system teachers are generally outperforming are out-of-state prepared or private prepared or alternative entry. And this is important because TFA and VIF make up a very small percentage of the state's workforce, whereas out-of-state, alternative entry, and privately prepared teachers from institutions in North Carolina make up a substantial portion of the state's workforce. So practically, we're talking about major differences in classrooms and students.
Great, very helpful. Thank you, Kevin. So we'll give a quick view of teacher retention by portal. Again, we've seen some of this in the dashboard view. How long do our teachers stay at 3- and 5-year benchmarks by portal? Teachers prepared by UNC and private institutions in North Carolina, about 85-86% persist for at least 3 years. That's the top bar. And approximately 75% persist for at least 5 years. That's the bottom bar. Out-of-state prepared teachers, about 74% or so persist for at least 3, and only 57% persist for 5. Alternative entry, 72%. Persist for 3 years, 55% for 5. And Teach for America, 31% persist for 3, and only 10% persist for 5 years. So the point here is difficulties with retaining teachers is a leading factor in addressing the teacher shortage in North Carolina. We also have data on out-of-state prepared teachers. To share this information with you, on the left side of the screen, you're looking at all employed teachers in the 2011-12 school year, the top 10 states that we have pulled teachers from in that out-of-state portal. And on the right side of the screen, the table shows teachers with less than 5 years experience. Many of the same states, they're slightly adjusted in terms of the concentration or number that we're pulling from. So a number of these states may be referenced on the call. Kevin, any thoughts or reflections on this?
I would say, we've had some questions a little bit about out-of-state teachers already, reasons why we may have them or don't, and President Ross referred to this as well. I mean, some of the states we're really pulling from, New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, for instance, are states that, we've seen student enrollment declines over the last decade or more, whereas we also have a set of states who are sort of just contiguous states to North Carolina, Virginia, South Carolina, Georgia, who are also, importing or exporting, if you will, a lot of teachers into North Carolina.
Great, thank you. So just a few comments about new initially licensed teachers in North Carolina. We're able to pull the portal's data, certainly do a cut of first-year teachers in our state. Just over 6% of all teachers in North Carolina are in their first year which is a higher percent than any other year of experience, and it's the teacher's least effective year. 27% of the teachers in our state are in their first 5 years of experience. And the other point I would make is that first-year teachers are disproportionately represented in North Carolina's lowest performing schools. Obviously, this is a big concern to us. This next slide shows you the number of teachers or the percentage by years of experience. And you see here that more teachers in North Carolina obviously are in their first year of experience than any other year of experience. Only 30% are in their most effective years, the 10th through 20th year of experience. And we all know that approximately half, 50% of all teachers leave within their first 5 years. The overall cost of attrition, preparation, training, recruitment, all of those things in aggregate has been estimated in some national reports as high as $7 billion annually at the national level, and as high as $84.5 million in North Carolina alone. Beyond the monetary cost, high turnover leads to losses in teacher quality and school stability and student achievement. Reducing turnover costs less. It makes good sense to invest in support for beginning teachers. We all know that. And so in response to this data, we have developed a program of support for beginning teachers based on the research and practitioner input in North Carolina. The North Carolina New Teacher Support Program has 3 primary components. It supports beginning teachers in their first 3 years of experience. We have a summer institute that was built upon and based on the Teach for America model. We offer instructional coaching in the classroom. We have instructional coaches that are hired by our institutions of higher education and are deployed out in our public schools working with those beginning teachers. And we also offer customized professional development. We started off with a cohort of 35 teachers 4 years ago. This year we're serving approximately 1,000 teachers. The program was designed and initiated with tremendous support from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction and was funded through our state's Race to the Top efforts. The outcomes that we have from our evaluation and intensive research we've done on this program are very promising early on in our analysis of the impact data on this program. Teachers served by the North Carolina New Teacher Support Program are retained at higher rates in the state, in their school district, and within their school than teachers not served by the program. That alone is an incredible and important aspect of the program. But we also have data that show teachers served by this program have greater impacts on student achievement at the elementary, middle, and high school levels, and in particular in mathematics and reading, 2 critical areas in our state. And first-year teachers, the results are the strongest. We continue to do intensive research on this program to build it, make it stronger and better, and scale it beyond the 1,000 teachers that we're serving this year. The outcomes and research we've done on this program enabled us to receive continuing funding for the program from the North Carolina General Assembly. They gave us partial funding enough to keep us going, and we're seeking to expand this program statewide. Just very briefly, you've seen some of the value add data in the dashboard, so I will just touch on this very briefly. Our program effectiveness analysis, we report on all programs. We have 11 models for student test scores outcomes. We look at elementary, middle, and high as referenced earlier, and you can see the tested subject areas that we are able to break out data by level at. Each UNC traditional preparation program was compared to all other sources of non-UNC teachers. Let me pause and see if Kevin has anything he'd like to add or say about this before we pull up the thermometer graphs.
I think the only thing I'd add, which we won't necessarily show today, but this program's effectiveness work, which we do every other year, continues to evolve, and we've sort of hinted at this. In our most recent analyses, we've added looks at evaluation ratings for teachers. We've done some analyses on subgroups of students, so how teachers do with free and reduced price lunch students, for instance, or low performing students. So we continue sort of to try to innovate in what we're doing with these reports so that programs continue to get more data and more granular data to have for their program improvement.
Great, thanks, Kevin. So just quickly, again, you saw this data represented in a different way within the dashboard. But here you're looking at UNC program comparisons versus all other teachers at the elementary school level. The first thermometer graph is for elementary school math. The middle graph is for reading at elementary level. And the graph to the right is for elementary school science. You can scout out the 0% line, and you see the programs above the 0% are on the plus side, better than average, and those that are below 0 are on the minus side, below average. And the institutions that are bolded with an asterisk are the ones that are significant and positive, or significant and negative, whether it falls above or below average. So you'll see in the far left for elementary school mathematics, UNC Greensboro and Appalachian State University are significant and positive, doing better. We want to learn more about what they're doing. In many instances, our research doesn't necessarily tell us what to do, but it tells us where we need to look more deeply. And that's exactly what this thermometer graph tells us here, is that we want to learn and know more about what Appalachian State University and UNC Greensboro are doing to prepare elementary school math teachers. The next slide shows you the same data for tested subject areas at the middle school level. And here you have middle school math, reading, science, and algebra. And then the last slide of thermometer graph shows you the data broken out for high school tested subject areas. So we have high school algebra 1 and 2, English, science, and social studies. The next and final segment of the research conversation we'd like to have with you today is on our data share initiative to drive the improvements of our UNC teacher preparation programs. And Dr. Bastian is going to lead the conversation on this part. So Kevin, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Lisa. So, sort of what we've been hinting at throughout, Lisa just made a comment about sort of our results sort of tell programs where to look, but they don't necessarily tell programs certainly what to do or how to improve. Obviously, the data you've seen today is all aggregate level data. It's, averages of their performance or their persistence or things like that, which is, again, as I've sort of said, good for accountability purposes and starts to help programs thinking about ways to improve, but doesn't go far enough. So through our own initiative and really through the push of the Council of Education Deans and being the deans of the schools of ed here in the UNC system, we are moving forward with this data sharing initiative where we'll actually be providing individual level data back to campuses. And so I'll just set up a little context about that. If you go to the next slide, Elisa. There we go, perfect. So, I mean, again, a lot of this context has sort of come up over the last couple of years with new CAPE standards, U.S. Department of Ed regulations. There's a real interest in evidence-based reform. From a research perspective, this is for teachers, and from a research perspective, this is driven by, research showing, certainly teachers matter, and there's a lot of variation in teacher performance. And this is, as I've said, this is sort of being driven, and we're thinking about this from this idea that there's limits to the aggregate level data that we're producing as a system. And, a question we've been asking is, if teacher prep programs really want to make evidence-based reforms, with what data can they do that? And that's where, again, this data sharing is coming in. And so just, to get right to the point, what we basically advocate for is that prep programs and researchers or state education agencies need to be establishing partnerships so that prep programs are receiving individual level data on their program graduates when those graduates become, teachers of record in the state's schools. If programs were to have this data, we think that this can help drive evidence-based program improvement because it's going to let programs sort of see, are our preparation practices aligned with the school and classroom environments in which our teachers are actually working? And then, perhaps more important, programs can start to assess how variation in their graduates' preparation experiences. People have different course sequences, different instructors. They come in and they score differently on certain portfolio assessments or things like that. So how do variation in graduates' preparation experiences or measures of their performance during teacher prep explain variation in how they do as teachers of record? And again, the key thing here is having this at the individual level data so that the programs could actually kind of explore that variability. So, again, this is sort of set up by research that we've been doing in North Carolina, research that other researchers in other states have been doing that have looked at the relationship between teacher preparation and teacher performance or teacher outcomes of some form. And, the strengths of this type of work is really that it's a form of accountability. It shows programs that are performing well or poorly, for instance, and that may encourage programs to reform by themselves or incentivize them to. But again, as I said, that they don't necessarily have the data with which to do that well. And it's certainly, I think this has happened in the UNC system over the last 5 or 6 years. The work we've done at the aggregate level has helped make the deans of the schools of ed, faculty members at the schools of ed, better consumers of research evidence in terms of asking the right questions, thinking about what these results mean. We've really seen the schools of ed and their faculty really pick up in that over the last 5 years. But as I've sort of hinted, the shortcomings of this aggregate research is really an inability to formally drive evidence-based reforms because the research isn't pinpointing why programs are doing well or poorly. So the data sharing initiative, we wanted to sort of help programs continue to stimulate a culture of evidence and a focus on program improvement by giving them individual level data on their graduates. So, specifically what we're doing in the UNC system. So our contention is, given the right resources, and those aren't necessarily easy to put together, but our contention is, data sharing like this can happen in other districts or states. But what we're doing specifically in the UNC system is we're going to give each of the 15 teacher prep programs over right now what looks like an 8-year period, separate files by year. And each file is going to contain basically data on all the individuals who were initially prepared by that teacher prep program and employed as teachers in the state's public schools in that year. And the data we're providing to, at the individual level to these campuses, we've kind of grouped conceptually in 5 categories. Data about their employment, their characteristics, the characteristics of the classrooms they're working in, the schools they're working in, and some of their outcomes. And this table sort of is a summary of that. And for each of these 5 categories, broadly lists sets of variables or measures that are included in these data sets that are coming to programs. And so, with this data, we think this can help programs improve. Now, I'll acknowledge that there's considerable challenges for programs to turn individual level data into program improvement. It's not a straightforward or easy process, but conceptually, this is sort of how we visualized what individual level data and program improvement might look like. As programs get this data, one thing they can do is they can conduct research with their own data. So we're giving them sort of external data, if you will, on their teachers, graduates as teachers of record. But preparation programs has a wealth of internal data, as I sort of hinted at, about their graduates or their teaching candidates' experiences, other data measures about their performance. And either through sort of theory-based research or data mining, if you will, programs can really sort of ask questions about what predicts something we're interested in, like teacher value added or teacher retention. this can also let, the data sharing can also really let teacher prep programs and their faculty conduct primary data collection and research. So if you have data identifying which of your teachers are high and low performing or very persistent, for instance, you can go out and observe them, interview them, survey them, do some different things like that, gather some primary data, and help that start to think about program improvement. And then sort of situated there in the middle is just this idea that having this data can start to, this doesn't happen automatically, but it can start to help programs improve their own capacity to conduct this type of research, to think about what questions should we be asking, what data and samples should we be putting together, what methods do we need to be using, what inferences should we draw from these results. I think this is all hopefully going to really funnel towards producing research evidence that prep programs can use for program reform. And so I hinted at some of these obstacles. From a research perspective, I think it's important that programs already have measures of teacher prep program progress and performance on teacher candidates or graduates that have predictive validity. I think a lot of the things that teacher prep programs measure they're not trying to measure something for predictive validity. They're trying to measure whether a teacher candidate meets a threshold of performance for licensure or something. And so sometimes programs don't have the necessary measures in-house. Certainly programs need data management systems and platforms to be able to organize and connect all this data. They need faculty who can conduct research, and at some institutions that's not a problem, and at others that are really focused on preparing teachers and not doing as much quantitative research, there's more of an issue there. And then, there's going to be programs that produce a large number of teachers, and sample size isn't really an issue. But conversely, there's going to be a set of programs who produce a relatively small number of teachers a year, which means that they can conduct research, but they may not be able to determine whether something is statistically significant or not. They may not have enough statistical power, and so that depending on how they sort of want to make decisions with evidence, that may sort of curtail their willingness to take action. And then organizationally, to be beyond these research-based challenges, teacher prep programs really have to create this culture of evidence. Basically, there has to be a coordinated and a systemic sort of view of improvement as important. It's not a one-off initiative. It's the whole faculty coming together and really analyzing data and trying to improve.
So with that, thank you, Kevin. Sharmila, we will now turn it back over to you to see if we have any questions that have been prompted in the system.
Thanks, Lisa, and thanks, Kevin. We actually do have several questions that are lined up in the system, and I will get to them in a moment. I just wanted to say that I'm so impressed with the research that you're doing and the fact that you're moving in the direction of program improvement. And I think Kevin really outlined nicely in the last few slides what are some challenges to taking accountability data and trying to apply that towards program improvement. And one of the comments that I had wanted to make about the Title II regulations is that when we wrote up our SHEEO comments, one of the things that struck us was that there was very much an accountability focus on those rules and not as much a program improvement focus. So I'm really impressed and heartened that North Carolina is moving in the direction of program improvement with your research agenda. So with that, I'll move on to these questions. So the first question is about success, basically defining success outside of teachers moving into teaching roles. And so is the question is basically if teachers are moving through your education programs and they choose to move into other academic, personal, and professional pursuits beyond that of being a P-12 teacher, is there a way to account for that in your current data system?
So that's a great question. North Carolina is a very fortunate state to have a rich set of data to pull from. And we do have data on employment within other job sectors other than education. The data that we conduct our research on, obviously, the majority of the data come from either our UNC institutional data or data that we obtain from our partners at the Department of Public Instruction, as well as some other partners like Teach for America. But we are able now to connect our data sets. We have accessibility to connect them to other employment data in the state. So we're just on the cusp of being able to track educators that we prepare that may pursue employment in other job sectors within our state. We do have the ability to look at some level of differentiation of educators that we prepare employed in our public schools, but perhaps not in a teaching position in the classroom.
Would I be correct to assume that those data would eventually be able to be perused through your data dashboard?
So the dashboard, the visual analytics tool it's infinitely expandable. So as we have that data available, we want to be we want to make the data and information as accessible as possible and to be as transparent as possible with the outcomes and results from our research. And some of the data are demographic, but they certainly are very informative to our conversations around issues like supply and demand. So yes, as it's available and as we work through those data elements, we want to provide that information within the dashboard.
Thank you. So our next question is, do many of the out-of-state teachers that North Carolina ends up hiring, do they end up taking courses from UNC in order to get certified? Are there requirements for certification in North Carolina that then ask teachers to take courses at within North Carolina or otherwise perform some sort of certification work in North Carolina before they can be certified to teach in North Carolina?
So that's another great question. We do have reciprocity with a number of states. Our state Board of Education does, and so that certainly factors into the answer of this question. We are able to look at any teacher, prospective, or educator employed in our school that has, or in our public schools that have taken coursework. If we have the correct detailed information on that individual, we can look to see if they are taking coursework at our institutions. There are a fair number of core members, TFA core members, that come in as a TFA core member, and of course the clock starts when they become employed to pursue the necessary coursework in order to get a continuing license. And there are a number of our institutions. Our TFA core members are concentrated in certain regional areas of our state, the northeastern part of the state, and the Charlotte-Mecklenburg area. And so UNC Charlotte, East Carolina University, and even North Carolina State University are institutions that regularly enroll and work with TFA core members so that they can take the necessary coursework in order to get their continuing license credential. Kevin, I don't know if you have any thoughts or reflections to that answer or question.
Just a little bit of adding to on the out-of-state. As you mentioned, I think there's reciprocity agreements with states. I think even more broadly, there's through teacher accreditation bodies, now CAPE, but its predecessors. There's been sort of reciprocity agreements with based on basically accreditation. So out-of-state teachers coming from accredited bodies sort of have had that reciprocity for certification.
Great, thank you. So the next question is about the new teacher support program. Obviously, since there's limited capacity for that new teacher support program, you did mention that there's priority to the low-performing schools. But the question is, how do you determine which new teachers will be able to participate in the new teacher support program cohort?
So essentially, when we are working within a school, we don't differentiate among the new or beginning teachers within that school. We would have at a minimum a whole school model of the beginning, what we would call in North Carolina BT1s, 2s, or 3s, teachers in their first 3 years of experience having not taught prior to that. And so we're within a whole school. We do not filter through and just serve beginning teachers that were prepared by UNC institutions. We serve all beginning teachers at that particular school. So they could be prepared out of state, they could be alternative entry, and a number of routes of preparation that we've talked about today. And in terms of which schools within a district, so it really depends. Some school districts, the principals are empowered to make those decisions. In other school districts, those decisions are made at the district level. In some of the schools where we work, it is a district model where we're serving perhaps all of the beginning teachers in the school district or in just select schools. So it really depends on the school system. And we're making our rounds to school districts across the state. As we speak, the director of the program, Elizabeth Cunningham, is out meeting with principals and superintendents and HR directors and making plans for the coming year of the program.
Excellent, thank you. And we have one more question queued up, and I welcome others to submit their questions as well. So the next question that's queued up is about the dependence on state-level testing for student outcome data. So the question is really, there's obviously limitations to the data that you can get from state-level tests, and perhaps the new tests that are coming with the new college and career-ready standards, whether we're talking about the Common Core or your state standards, are going to be better indicators of student outcomes, and it may be more than just one end-of-year test. But basically, the question is, how do you deal with the fact that it's better to use multiple measures for student outcomes, and currently most states are limited to the state assessments and the end-of-year assessments, which aren't necessarily the best ways to demonstrate student outcomes in looking at teacher performance?
Well, certainly a lot of the data that we shared with you today is limited to the analysis we've done, value add on test score data. I'm actually going to ask Kevin if he'd like to respond. In what we did not share with you today is our 2015 program effectiveness analysis, where Kevin is working really hard to complete our policy brief on that. We have presented the results to our Council of Education Deans. But in this latest analysis, because only 35% of our teachers are teaching in tested subject areas, we've begun to incorporate in evaluation data. So I'm going to ask Kevin if he'll say a word about this latest analysis.
So we're very cognizant, I think, of the fact that while there's legitimate uses to value added, there's also weaknesses to it. Some are methodological weaknesses, which we're not talking about here, and others are more practical concerns. One being, as Elisa said, it only covers about a third, more or less, of a teacher workforce. That'll vary some. And another being, for a program, it's a single indicator of performance. There's no way of programs really knowing sort of what teaching practices contributed to that value-added estimate, nor are there sort of teaching practices broken down. You don't see 4 estimates on different things like classroom management and reflection or something. So that is where the evaluation ratings in North Carolina that we're starting to use are important. There's 5 evaluation standards: leadership, classroom environment, content knowledge, facilitating student learning and reflecting on practice. And we're able to use methods to sort of examine, which preparation programs, which graduates of preparation programs are more likely to receive higher evaluation ratings, controlling for some important, characteristics. And, that lets programs start to see, our graduates are doing well in classroom environment as rated by their principals. And again, there's problems with this, just like there are with value added in terms of subjectivity of ratings or things like that. But it is another measure to look at. I know some states have, North Carolina doesn't really have this. Some states have, student surveys about teachers, which have shown in other research to be, solid measures of teacher performance. So, I mean, I think we definitely agree that having some robust and varied outcomes is really important.
So I would add to that what we did not share today, and in retrospect maybe we should have had one more slide on this, but is our work to pilot and use of the EdTPA, Teacher Performance Assessment pilot that we have in North Carolina. And so that's one more aspect of, that's an outgrowth of our research that we're working with 7 institutions across the system. One of the recommendations from our Board of Governors that President Ross referenced earlier is an expansion of that pilot in the use of EdTPA as a way to help drive program improvements. Just another method that we're employing to help make more research-based and data-informed decisions about program improvement.
Thank you so much. We are at the end of our second question period, and I just want to turn it back to Elisa and Tom for any final comments they'd like to make before the end of the webinar.
Well, thank you very much, and I'll just bring us to a conclusion. I know it's been a lengthy period of time, but we hope very much it's been helpful. I mainly would like to thank Kevin for his terrific work and Gary Henry for the work that they've done on our teacher quality research, because it really is informing better practice at the university and is making a real difference, I think, not only in the preparation of our teachers, but therefore in the classrooms of North Carolina, which is the ultimate goal. And I want to thank Maddie and Tiffany as well for the great work they've done with us in preparing the dashboard. And I think the keys here, and the reason these things tie together, is that the data that we get from the research, that our teacher quality research, really is useful information. It not only lets people know what's going on at a particular moment in time and what trends are, but it really is helping inform the policies that we develop and the decisions that we make in our educator preparation programs. So the teacher quality research is the underpinning for all of this. It is really the critical piece, I think, for all the work that we're doing in the state. The dashboard is really our effort to share what we're learning with the people of North Carolina and with the policymakers of North Carolina. And as I said earlier, whether it's good or bad, it's important that people understand where we are. And it's my belief that we're doing good work and that our teacher preparation programs are doing a good job. There's no question they can do a better job and they can be improved. But what's interesting that we've learned in the research is that a school may be doing exceptionally well in some areas and not quite as well in others. And this is what we can learn from the research, and that lets us target where our remedial action might be to try to solve the problem and bring the entire school up to the standard we'd like it to see. So this has been a terrific project, I think, for North Carolina, and one that we hope very much that we can continue, and we hope that our board and the policymakers in the state understand the value of what we're doing, and we hope they do and think they do, and that we'll continue this and we'll get better at it as time goes along, and we really will be using data to inform decisions and to improve teacher education, which is the ultimate goal. So we have thanks to everybody who's been on the line listening, and be happy to talk with anyone in the future about our work, I think you've learned this afternoon that the person you really need to go to is Elisa Chapman, and I thank her for the great job she does